Good evening and welcome to this episode of the Beyond COVID-19 webcast dedicated tonight to Egypt and hosted by No Peace Without Justice. So this weekly webcast aims at reminding us that human rights violations have not been put on lockdown during this pandemic. In fact, as we will see today, COVID-19 has provided autocrats with a new opportunity for more repression. So before we start, I invite you all to visit the No Peace Without Justice website on npwj.org and to follow them on social media. So their English Facebook page is No Peace Without Justice. Their Italian page is Non c'è pace senza giustizia. And on Twitter, you can follow them with NPWJ Press. On Instagram, they are on NPWJ_. And on YouTube, you just have to search No Peace Without Justice. So you can watch and rewatch these panel discussions on YouTube. And I invite you to share or comment on this event on the social media by using the hashtag BeyondCovid-19. So today we are very lucky to have with us two amazing panelists with Lubna Darwish and Haya Higazi. Our focus will be human rights and arbitrary detentions in Egypt. Indeed, the repression against the civil society was already at an unprecedented level before the pandemic arrived, with more than 60,000 political prisoners and regular accounts of enforced disappearances, extrajudicial killings, and many other abuses. How has the coronavirus impacted the human rights in Egypt? How does the situation look like in terms of transparency and freedom of speech? How does human rights activists keep working? Those are the questions we will try to answer tonight. About myself, quickly, my name is Alban de Rochebrune. I work as a political communications advisor specialized on human rights and democratization issues with a strong focus on Egypt. So first of all, I will ask our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and their activities, starting with Lubna Darwish, who's with us tonight from Egypt. Lubna, can you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Alban. Hi, everyone. I'm Lubna Darwish. I work with the Egyptian Initiative for Personal Rights, EIPR. I'm the Gender and Human Rights Officer. And today I'm kind of also Patrick Zaki's colleague, and speaking on from that place.
Thank you very much. And we have Haya Higazi. Haya, can you please introduce yourself and maybe the activities of the Beladi Foundation as well?
Yes. So my name is Aya Hijazi, and Egypt they say Higazi, both ways. I'm in Tunis, but I actually live in the United States. After we used to have Biladi in Egypt in 2013, 2014, but then we got imprisoned and we had to leave. 3 years later, we were deported to the United States. We're actually opening a branch in Tunisia. And now we work on women and child political prisoners in Biladi.
Thank you so much, Aya. So now, before I let our panelists speak, I'd like to give a brief overview of the situation in Egypt and why it is crucial to raise the awareness about human rights violations there. So, despite the Arab Spring that ousted Mubarak in 2011 and led to the first free presidential election in the country, the July 2013 military coup d'etat put a stark end to the hopes for democracy and freedom. Since then, the repression against political and human rights activists has reached an unprecedented level. There are more than 60,000 political prisoners in Egypt. That amounts to more than half of the total carceral population. Extrajudicial killings against civilians have multiplied and been left unpunished, especially in Sinai. On that front, I'd like to mention the Rabat Square massacre in August 2013, where no one has been punished since, while like more than 800 peaceful demonstrators were killed in one single day by the security forces. Enforced disappearances and torture have become common practice, and children have not been spared, as I know very well. Freedoms of all sorts have been crushed, starting with the freedom of press, with the recent example of the Guardian correspondent Ruth Michelson being kicked out of the country a few weeks ago. And her fault was just to raise questions about the lack of transparency in the government's narrative about the COVID-19 and about the official number of cases in Egypt. NGO laws, emergency laws, or terrorism laws are amended on a regular basis to legalize the repression, even though they go in full contradiction with the constitution. But Sisi's Egypt has been considered by the world's most powerful countries as a strategic ally that allegedly guarantees stability in the region. So we could spend hours describing the whys and the hows of how the dictatorship can get such a blind support from the international community. The point is that what many political commentators have been saying is that the country is now at great risk of chaos because of Sisi. The debt has almost tripled. The Gulf countries are not as generous as they used to be. Water scarcity has become a vital threat, and the social and economic situation is worse than ever, with 60% of the population seen as either poor or vulnerable by the World Bank. So that's it for my brief, which was not that brief. I'm now turning towards Lubna for the first question. Lubna, I'd like to ask you to describe from your perspective as an activist on the ground within the Egyptian Initiative for Personal Rights. What's your description of the situation? And also, of course, you're quite active to cover the case of Patrick Zaki. Can you please tell us a few words about it, please?
So Patrick, we're not only covering the case. Patrick is actually our colleague in the Egyptian Initiative for Personal Rights. We worked together closely, him and I, on the gender file for a long time before he left to Italy to start his master's degree. Patrick left the country in late 2019 in August, had his first semester in Bologna University, and then on his way back to Cairo on the 7th of February 2020, he was arrested at the airport. And for 24 hours, he was illegally held, blindfolded, threatened, tortured by beating and by electric shock. And then the next day, more than 24 hours later, he appeared in front of the prosecution and we started seeing a case against him. And in front of the prosecution, he was faced with a fabricated police arrest report, claiming that he was arrested a day later from Mansoura, his home city where he was born, but it's not even where he lived before that. And then since then, we've been going through sadly, the usual process of supposed to be due process, which is non-existent anymore. And especially, and because you're talking about COVID-19 and its effect on the due process or the legal and political situation. Even before COVID-19, the situation was pretty dire. Remand detention was used systematically against people arrested on political cases as a punishment in itself, instead of an exceptional measure to make sure that you're protecting the case or someone else. It became a norm that people would be arrested on any charges and kept for at least 2 years, which is the legal limit, but sometimes it's surpassed. And in that context, of course, one should mention Shadi Habash, who passed away more than a week ago in prison after he has spent more than 2 years in prison, which is in remand detention, which is the legal limit. I mean, there's no legal situation where you can be kept in prison on remand detention beyond the 2 years, but that was the case of Shadi and many others. And so the situation was already bad before COVID-19. And when came COVID-19, it became even worse. Any pretense of hearings and hearing dates where your retention is renewed or not, supposedly, are not held. People are not transferred to the prosecution. You do not appear in front of the prosecution or a judge, and you're just kept in custody automatically, which is a totally illegal situation. I mean, we have, for example, in the case of Patrick, he was, in the beginning, he had like 3 times an order of pretrial detention for 15 days. And then they expired on the 23rd of March. And since the 23rd of March, and for 7 weeks, the hearing kept being postponed, which meant it did not take place. And the number of pretrial days ordered before expired, and he was being basically kept illegal. There's no legal ground whatsoever for people to be kept beyond their order, their pretrial detention order. And we're left with a situation where practically people are supposed to be let go, but they're not being let go because it's I would say with COVID-19, even the pretense of due process is at least suspended. And it's a very alarming thing. We're not saying that before that due process was taking place, but even when the pretense is not kept anymore, it creates a new normal. And a new normal that is very alarming because that's part of the tactic generally is to normalize things. You normalize things that are not legal, you normalize things that are not correct, and with time, and constitutional even, and with time it becomes a given that people stay in prison for 2 years for no reason, or that people are maltreated in prisons, or that the situation in prisons are that bad. And Patrick, like all other prisoners, since the 9th of March, has not received any visits, family visits. There's no way to make sure that anybody's safe or get any contact. I mean, even the law provides an option that the prisoner would call his family to just instead of the visit, and this not taking place. So basically, since the 10th of March, nobody knows about anything happening within for prisoners. So prisoners are kept inside, there's no visits, everything's suspended as part of the COVID-19 precautionary measures. But at the same time, nothing else is taking place to make people in such a harsh time understand what is the situation inside, especially that everybody's worried. The prisons in Egypt are extremely overcrowded, non-hygienic, not the best place to be during a health crisis.
Thank you. That's quite helpful to understand. Just one question: like even the non-political prisoners are deprived of visits?
Yes, all prisons have like suspended visits since the 10th of March until this moment, and there's no alternatives. We may understand suspending visits if you're giving people other alternatives like phone calls, video calls, and even like letters. They're not allowing letters out, so it's there's no way to make sure that people are fine or just to get any news. And I mean, all of us are calling our family and friends and loved ones all the time to make sure that everyone is fine. And you can imagine people being locked there all that time, knowing nothing about their families, and their families knowing nothing about them, or their friends or anybody.
Yeah. Okay. And haven't then them given any date for Patrick Zaki's case? Like, we will discuss it in, I don't know, May or June?
I mean, almost 10 days ago, he had a hearing, but he did not appear in front of the prosecution. The lawyers were not allowed in for the hearing, and it was renewed, but it already dropped. It was already invalid because earlier his detention was illegal. So it's not even legal, but it's a new level of denying right of defense. I mean, for years in state security cases, the right to defense was kind of theatrical because lawyers are not allowed to see in many cases, the file of the case or any details or really do, their work as defense. But getting to the point where you get a renewal of hearing without seeing the defendant and without allowing their lawyers to be there, just by signing a piece of paper, that's a new alarming situation.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Now, well, still about Patrick, we have a video of one of his classmates, Sofia Seligini. She's been studying in the same master as Patrick in Italy, in Bologna. The master is called GEMA, a Master in Gender Studies, funded by the European Union. So can we send the video, please?
Hello everyone, I'm Sofia Seligini, a first-year student of the GEMA Master in Bologna. The Gemma Master is a Master of the European Union in Gender Studies, which is an area that is not well known here in Italy. It could be defined as the multidisciplinary approach that puts women's experience in history and in society at the center of the conversation, so as to expose certain power relations that have always regulated our societies. I'm a course mate of Patrick Zaki, and I'm also his friend, and I know that he's both an excellent student and an amazing person. He's an excellent student because he managed to pass a very tough selection with people coming from all over the world, and he's managed to get a scholarship from the European Union, which is very prestigious. He's an amazing person because he always cares for others. He's always generous and good-hearted, and he always organizes stuff where he invites everyone. He always wants to be he always wants to integrate everyone, and in fact we've managed to make a very close group with the people from the first and the second year of Gemma. We're only 10 between the first and the second year, and we all know what an amazing person he is. So when more than 3 months ago he was detained in Cairo, we were all shocked. I last heard from Patrick the day before he left, and he told me he was very excited for his 1-week vacation back home to meet his family and his friends, and he asked me if I wanted anything, if I wanted a gift or something. So he was very, very happy and very calm about that. But then he was arrested, and he was accused of subversion, instigation to violence, and other, to me, senseless, absurd accusations. Since that moment, with the coronavirus situation, his detention only got worse. In fact, on the 9th of March, it was the last time that his family got to visit him, because after that, Egyptian prisons didn't allow family visits anymore. But he's also not been able to call them and to send them a letter or anything that would make them feel that would make them know that he's okay. They're very worried, and we, as his friends, are very worried because we don't know about his health situation at the moment. And we also know that Patrick is asthmatic, so in a context of a overcrowded prison, he's very at risk with the coronavirus situation, and it doesn't make sense that he's still being detained. Moreover, the official detention period ended on the 23rd of March, more than a month ago, and he's still detained, and he's not being given the chance to an appeal. So his detention is illegal. The last hearing happened without Patrick and without his lawyers, which of course didn't give him or them the right to defend him, and it's been once again postponed to the 19th of May, so in a few days. We hope that he will be able to be there this time, and we hope that they will release him, because it's risky for him to be in prison right now, and it's not even his legal detention period anymore, so it doesn't make sense that he's still detained to this. As soon as we learned about Patrick's detention, we immediately organized ourselves. We made the Facebook page Patrick Libero, we made the Twitter profile, we basically founded the Free Patrick movement. The Free Patrick movement is an international network of friends, companions, colleagues, and supporters of Patrick. At the beginning, we did a lot of manifestations and protests here in Italy, in Bologna, of course. almost every day in order to raise awareness about his case, and we managed to do that. Patrick's case made the headlines, it got on the news, it got very popular. Manifestations then spread throughout Italy and throughout Europe in general. In fact, also the Gemma partner universities showed a lot of support and organized their own manifestations and their own initiatives. And just like them, Unibo showed its support to Patrick. They organized what became the biggest manifestation in his support. They managed to fill the whole main square of Bologna, and it was a very emotional moment. Unibo has always supported his case, and it's doing so even now during this pandemic emergency. The rector is still asking for his release, for him to be able to continue his studies. And Patrick surely has a strong support network. Unibo even made an email address for Patrick to which you can send your thoughts, your support, your kind words, so that he can read all the emails when he gets back to Bologna, and he can move on with his studies.
Indeed, thanks to Patrick Zaki's friends, the mobilization outside of Egypt has been extraordinary, with a petition collecting hundreds of thousands of signatures, and it hasn't weakened despite the coronavirus. I'd like to add, by the way, that even though the medical staff in Egypt lacks of the bare minimum in terms of protection and equipment, the Egyptian government has sent more than 1 million masks to Italy. Sorry for that. 1 million masks to Italy, along with other medical equipment and sanitizers. And this was clearly seen as Sisi trying to consolidate his relationship with Italy and bury the most sensitive topics between the two countries. Thanks very much, Lubna. I'm now turning towards Aya. Aya, you've dedicated your activities to the defense of the rights of the political prisoners, and especially women and children. Can you let us know how the COVID-19 has specifically affected them, although we already covered this a little bit with Lubna?
Basically, sadly, it's the same thing. But what's worse is that you think, like, prisons are overcrowded, it's dangerous, and the government is ill-equipped to deal with that. That they'd stop the arrests, actually, but no, they have been carrying out more and more arrests. I think like there were around 30, like I'm not sure at the top of my head what the number is, like around 30 arrests of women and children in March, and something similar in April. There's a well-known case of Ala Abdel Fattah's family, and I want to go over it because they've been really documenting what's happening during COVID. The mother and daughter and aunt went to protest in Tahrir, which is something that doesn't happen anymore. They were carrying balloons, and they just wanted visitation rights, or like some sort of access to prisoners during COVID. And they were arrested. They were taken to a police station where they had to mingle with other prisoners, and then they were finally released. But what's been happening, I'll just go over Ala briefly, because we know a little bit of what's happening with him. He's been on a hunger strike. Him and an American Egyptian, actually, his name is Muhammad Amesha, and another guy, Hamid, and that's what we know of. We don't know who else is on a hunger strike. And usually when people, especially high-profile people, are on a hunger strike in Egypt, this is something huge, and people would know. But because of the lack of access, they're not even able to write and to get engagement. So as Lumna said, visitations are not allowed. In the very beginning, parents or family members could get stuff in, like food. In the case of Ala, they're wanting to get like water, minerals, and things like that, letters. But now they haven't been allowing, except like for 10 visitations a day, not visitations, like 10 family member, not family, like 10 prisoners to receive different items, just 10 a day. And usually like there are probably more than 1,000 visits. And so basically until the prisoner's turn comes, it's like, it would be what, a year later. And so there's really no way to know if the prisoners are alive or dead. That's the end of it. Lubna mentioned that there's a law that allows for access, like whether phone call. Of course, the UN says internet, that's impossible. But even phone calls, they could make access to phone calls if they really have good intentions. But they don't even allow that. So we don't really know if the So this is regarding COVID, and I'd like to hear more questions so we can segue into other women and child prisoners.
Yeah, thanks. Also, yeah, I wanted like there was this report that was published by both Human Rights Watch and the Beladi Foundation about torture on children in prisons. As I told you before, like I never read something that awful. Can you maybe say a few words about it?
Sinai. Sinai is a place that is where the treatment is awful as it gets. Everyone who's there and who's arrested is suspected of being a terrorist, even children. The most appalling case I've come across is a child who was 12, just 12 when he was arrested in 2017. And he was taken to the National Security Headquarters, and he was really tortured brutally. He was stripped naked. He was hung from his arms, suspended from his arms. They set fire under his bed. They wanted him to confess where his brother is. His brother actually joined ISIS, but he was a 12-year-old boy. He didn't know.
There's a network issue with Aya.
And then actually,
okay, Aya has disappeared, unfortunately. Well, I invite you all to read this report. It's a Human Rights Watch website. It's absolutely appalling. Well, my next question to Aya would have been on. Oh, yes, Aya, you're back.
yes. So where was it that you last heard me, just to make sure?
You were telling about the 12 years old Sinai boy who were asked whether his brother belonged to ISIS, but of course didn't know because he was only 12.
Okay. And so I think you've heard the torture that happened to him. This was in national security, and then he was taken to transferred from Sinai to Cairo, and he was placed in solitary confinement, denied food and clothing and water. He developed skin diseases, and he was like, and then his father. They brought his father, and who was tortured next to him. We've heard accounts that the father is dead, but this is how much we don't have information. We can't verify that the father is dead. And then his brother was found. The brother whom they held him for was found. He should have been released. The judge ordered his release, but instead of releasing him, he disappeared again. Um, 2018, December 2018. So since December 2018 till now, so that's like almost a year and a half. We don't know where he is. Just recently, we've heard like what we call good news is that he's alive and held in national security premises, but this is like through illegal channels. I think he's like someone with him was released, and he got to give a phone call.
All right. Well, thank you. That's I don't know what to say. Very sad. Maybe very quickly, like well, it seems clear that the Egyptian people need the international community to wake up. because so far Sisi has had a highway in front of him, able to do anything without a word from the international community, probably starting with actually imposing conditioning criteria before proceeding to any partnership of any kind. Aya, as a dual citizen, maybe you want with the US, sorry, do you want to add something on that front?
Yeah, what happens with the US is really sad. There is a $1.3 billion given to Egypt annually. There is a waiver around $300 million that's supposed to be, there is a conditionality actually, like they wouldn't give $300 million if the human rights situation is bad. But the State Department is allowed to waive it, and this is what they've been doing basically ever since Camp David. They just used it like twice where they didn't allocate the money, but then they reallocated it the second time. In the States, they like to say that it's impossible. There's nothing really we can do, but they can. They say like there's, you know, he'd move towards Russia. He would uh, do more suppression. Like the $300 million, it's really nothing, and it's just one thing. Like only one element from all the aid that gets from the United States. There's like the other $1 billion. Sisi has been like purchasing the Apaches now. I don't know if you've heard. America is integral. They really don't want to use the pressure, and it's just easy when you talk about to them, actually, to senators and congressmen. Some say, well, you know, stability, Israel. They actually say that he's crucial for Israel. Some say no, he's good with the Copts, and some tell you like no, he's keeping the Islamists under control. And so basically there's no will, or although a lot of them are quite aware of what's happening.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Well, it's more or less the same in the EU, unfortunately. And well, although the IMF has always said that it has a purely economic role, the IMF just approved another emergency loan to Egypt. But like one can wonder where the money is going to go, because despite all those loans, both from the IMF but also from the Gulf countries and the US, etc., like it doesn't seem that like real Egyptians have felt in any way any positive impact from those loans. Thank you. Oh, Aya disappeared. Well, thank you so much to the two of you. The situation is critical for sure, and the coronavirus hasn't eased the pressure on the population or on the civil society. And the work of activists both inside and outside Egypt is all the more necessary. What I'd like to do is to give you back the mic for some final remarks or messages that you'd like our audience tonight to go home with. Maybe starting with Lubna. You are on mute.
So, if there is a main message that we can go home with, I think it's crucial to, in the time of COVID-19, to think of that what becomes normal right now may become normal for good. And it's important for us that it's easy to commit to human rights and it's easy to commit to good values when the days are easy, but it's essential in moments like these to make sure that human rights stay an issue that's on the table, and that the most vulnerable groups of the population, whether outside or inside of prisons, but now that we're talking about prisons, that prisoners are in the center point of how we see the current crisis of COVID-19 and the measures taken. The need to protect the prisoners, whether through precautionary measures, releases, or in the case of Egypt, I mean, the mass numbers of remand detention prisoners can be simply just like let go home because they're on remand detention, they're not even serving any time. So it's essential at this time to think of human rights as a scope to look at the current situation from, not simply by saying that we'll deal with it later, there's a crisis, health crisis. The crisis is beyond this.
Thank you very much. Aya? What? final word do you want to say?
So I'd like to pick up where Lubna left off, is that what is happening right now will become the new normal. Now people like, and I want to say that there was a picture, Muna, the Ala Abdel Fattah's sister, posted on Facebook and Twitter of her mother sleeping on the streets because waiting, every day to get a letter. And people will get desensitized to all of that and think that, that's normal again. And like the one thing that people may take away is like, oh, Egypt, we were bored with it. It's it's been living through dictatorship forever. But no, like the scale is unprecedented, and it's not stagnating. No, it is worsening. One thing is like what we mentioned is we can't even know if prisoners are alive or dead. That's new. Enforced disappearances. Almost now everyone who's arrested goes to an enforced disappearance. And then like another type of violation that we see with women and men is that they're released from prison and then they're like recycled again, and then before even they're released, they find themselves charged with something they committed while in prison. And so like Sisi has no intention of just getting his grip on the chair or on power and then like releasing. No, like it's not just those who were active in 2014, 15, 16. There are new arrests that don't stop even with children. I just want to say like there was one case of the guy, he called himself a protester, children made videos saying they will protest. They arrested 47, and the 47 are still in prison. And so no, there's no going back. It's only becoming worse. And I want to say I'm a token here that public pressure does help, and so like public pressure and speaking up does save lives.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we'll have to end our discussion here. Thanks again. I hope this gave a good overview, a bit depressing though, but of the human rights situation in Egypt. Thank you to our panelists for their fantastic insights, and thanks for their work, of course. Thanks to all the viewers who followed us tonight. Thank you as well to No Peace Without Justice for organizing those amazing discussions every Friday. By the way, next week's webcast will be on the role of international justice in the post-COVID era. I wish you all a very good evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.